working in New England, I'm very aware that if I go to a historical society here and I say, what's the historical record for the Civil War? There's historical forces that shape that record and cause it to be like mostly white men's letters and diaries telling you about the Civil War. So they only tell certain sides of the story and they shape the story the way their audience wants it to be. And what I've been trying to do with those records is figure out how are they shaping it and what's that negative space that's left behind, who has that story. And I realized, looking specifically at the diaries and letter collections that I was working with, I was really interested in how they thought of the end of the Civil War. There's all different ways to tell that story. But then here's this guy, I assume Alec Turner was telling these stories to Daisy as a kid. He's telling her, oh yeah, here's the end of the war. It was like the end of the world. It was a Holocaust. And putting that alongside, like, I'm fine, I'm not in danger, I'm eating well, I broke my finger in a fight with a big German soldier, you know, these little stories that come home. In the letters collections, I just thought, wow, that's a contrast. I've had some interesting conversations with some artists who insist, no, don't think of the reader, that's a distraction, you know, focus on the story. But I kind of feel like we're saying the same thing in some ways, because if you're drawing it for someone else to read, you have to in some way empathize with that other person. How are they going to receive this story? Can it go out into the world and support itself and make sense to people? And in some ways, it's like, I feel like there's another audience that is in my head, or maybe not, that is like, if this page were read by the person who wrote that primary source document, or if Daisy Turner looked at this page, what would she think? Trying to empathize with that. What did she intend with her story? You have to kind of put me in their shoes and try to understand what our common connections are that could help us understand each other. And the results aren't the graphic novel by Daisy Turner, you know, we need to be aware of that. Like, it's a graphic novel of modern cartoonists' interpretations of that historical material, and it's telling you as much about our values and our learning process as it is about the material. She managed to keep those stories alive, and those stories reach back, you know, over 200 years. The slate quarry, right, where they're digging down, and I decided I'd do it as a full page because I wanted to hint at the huge pit, but not show it in its entirety, but hint at it. And that's drawn from that photograph, that amazing photograph. That's Alec Turner. You can see in his body language his whole story. His body language tells you this is a guy who got this group together. And then just the idea of the stories being embedded in that, even if we're not aware of it, you scan that picture and then you see a slate quarry. You come back and hold up a magnifying glass to each detail and you see how the guys are quarrying. But you get up close to Alec Turner and there's a watch chain on his vest. That's the watch that the colonel gave him, right? That's an incredible talisman that he carries, that is like his connection with somebody else who they helped each other through this whole ordeal. And when you just look at the picture, it's just a detail. It's something you leave out because, you know, that's not essential to the slate quarry story, but it's there. And when you come back to it and zoom in on that, that's the symbol of that story to me. So I just love that. If you know the stories, you look at the picture and you see something totally different. I just kept coming back to that little newspaper clipping of, oh, yep, here they, well, you know, you never guess who just walked up Main Street, you know, this kind of gossipy newspaper columnist. I tried to get a little fragment of like, yeah, the snow's awful deep this year. Oh, by the way, they just arrived, this group who's going to be logging, they're living in tents up in the woods, you know, and without getting into too many details of their arrival, which felt like a different adventure. I want the reader to kind of arrive at that point and say, oh, the adventure is just beginning. Oh, this isn't going to be easy. I think implicit in that newspaper fragment is like, oh, they're strangers in this land too. And they have a whole new set of challenges. It's optimistic, but also I hope mysterious. And I hope it makes the reader want to hear about that adventure next. That's what I aim for, I think, in most of my stories, is that the reader leaves feeling like their imagination's running and they have some questions and they want to know more. I think that's a good ending point.